Well, welcome back to Managerial Accounting. The purpose of this little mini lecture is to review the take-home part of the exam. So there were 5 take-home questions. First one had to do, we had to use the sequential method, sometimes called the step-down method, and we allocate security department costs and maintenance department costs under the step-down method, and they said start with the security department cost first. So that was the larger one. So the security department was supposed to be allocated on the basis of square feet. And the square feet of security department, a portion of that actually we have to allocate some of those costs to the maintenance department as well. So under the sequential method, sometimes called the step-down method, you start with the largest cost of the support departments and you allocate that to other support departments and the production department. So 6,000 square feet was the total amount that you had to allocate. So security department allocation of the cost is 4,500. So it's 10% of maintenance, 40% of cutting, 50% of sewing, all on the basis of square feet. The cost that you're allocating is 4,500. So you allocate 4,500 worth of costs. Here's the cost allocations. And then the maintenance department now includes the 2,200, which you had originally, plus their allocation of the security department cost of 450, so it's now 2,650, and you allocate maintenance on the basis of machine hours, so 3,600, 5,400 gives you 9,000, so you got 40% in cutting, 60% in sewing. Your cost you're allocating is 2,650, so here's your cost allocation. So then when it comes to the total cost of the cutting department is what you had originally, plus your share of security, plus your share of maintenance, gives you 24,060. And for the sewing department, it was 24,900. Their share of security was 2,250, and their share of maintenance was 1,590, giving you a total of 28,740. Question 34, you had to allocate here on the basis of total market value at split off. So there are a couple of errors that folks made on this one. So you had to remember to take the pounds at split off and multiply by the market price. If you use a different market price other than the one that was given, then you got a very different market value at split off. Also, the cost that you're allocating are 1,700 that was given. So it's based on the total market value at split off. It's 30% to raw sugar, 45% to granulated sugar, and 25% to castor sugar, whatever that is. Never had castor sugar. That was like a combination of castor oil and sugar. So here's your cost allocations, 510, 765, and 425. 25, I think everyone got this right. You had to get the composite sales price, so it's 80% of this product M. The product Zorro was 20%, so 80% and 20% of the sales price. 80% and 20% of the variable cost. So that is your composite unit contribution margin for both products, weighted based on the amount that they sell, proportion of the sell. So you get a break-even point of 215,000, and then you got to allocate that 80% to product to the Yankee model, and 20% to the Zorro model. So it's 172,000 of Yankee and 43,000 of Zorro. Next one here, last two, if you didn't actually give me the statements that I requested, you didn't get full credit. You showed, even if you showed all your computations. So what I wanted to see here was an absorption basis income statement. So you had to put the name of the company, the fact that this was an absorption costing income statement, and the period of time. So there was the absorption one, and then here's the variable one down here. And in this case, you produced more units than you sold. So you sold 12,500 units. And what you had to do is you had to get the cost of goods sold under absorption costing. So you had to figure out what the materials cost was, what the labor cost was, what the variable overhead was, and what the fixed overhead was. So you divide by 15,000. That was the number of units produced. So you come up with a total unit cost of 260. 260 times 12,500 gives me 3,250,000. So that's my absorption cost, the cost of goods sold, subtracted from sales. That's my gross margin. And then my selling and administrative expenses, 125 plus the 45. So I get 2,830. 2,830,000. And in this case, you actually produced more than you sell. So if you produce more than you sell, you know the absorption should give us a higher operating income than the variable costing, which we find to be true, because if we get the variable cost per unit, we include materials, we include labor, we include variable factory overhead. We don't include fixed factory overhead. So we get 220. So it's sales minus the variable cost of goods sold gives us manufacturing margin. Subtract from that variable selling administrative expenses. Okay, so that gives us a contribution margin of 3,375. From that, you got to reduce it by the fixed costs, which are all fixed costs, whether they be overhead or whatever, they're all considered period costs, 645. So you get operating income of 2,730,000, which is less than the operating income we got on the absorption costing. And we know that was going to be the case because we produced more units than we sold. And then the last one, again, to get full credit here, you had to show the name of the company, the fact that this was the cost of goods sold budget, and for the period of time. So get used, if you ask for a full statement, make sure you got the headings on there as well. You wouldn't have gotten full credit even if you had the right computation, if you didn't show the proper headings. Right? So you have to figure out first of all, you have to figure out the materials cost. So beginning raw materials plus materials purchases gives me materials available for sale minus the ending materials. So that's the materials used in production. Then you add to that direct labor. Then you add to that factory overhead. That's your total manufacturing cost. Added to the beginning work in process. That gives you your total work in process during the period minus the ending work in process. That'll give you the cost of goods manufactured. So beginning finished goods plus cost of goods manufactured. That's the finished goods available for sale minus the ending inventory of finished goods gives you the cost of goods sold. Okay, so I hope you found that little review useful, and I will see you on Thursday. You did well on the exam. The average grade was an 82, which is a good grade for a managerial accounting class. So some of you who struggled on the first exam seem to do a little bit better. Some of you who did real well on the first exam didn't do quite as well on this one. So maybe you got a little bit complacent. I don't know. Maybe the material was harder. But whatever, as a group, you did well. And I encourage you to keep up the good work going into the final third of the semester. I shall see you on Tuesday. You have a wonderful weekend. Adios, au revoir, hasta luego.